Cyclops, Wolverine, Rogue, and all of your favorite mutants are back in action thanks to X-Men 97, the brand new show that picks up right where the animated series left off. With all this attention back on Professor X's ragtag team of superheroes, I wondered what Electronic Gaming Monthly thought of the X-Men video games. Did they have a favorite? As it turns out, EGM reviewed a total of 29 X-Men games between 1989 and 2009. That includes a bunch of beat-em-ups, side-scrolling action games, and of course, a whole line of Capcom fighters. While this list is going to include a number of prominent team-ups, including the likes of Spider-Man and Captain America, we're only going to include the games that are branded as X-Men or feature multiple characters from the iconic team. What we're going to do today is count down the best and worst X-Men games using Electronic Gaming Monthly's own words and scores. There's no editorializing here, we're just going to focus on what the critics said back when these games first came out. Oh my stars and garters, we're about to find out what happens when EGM ranks the X-Men.
Hear the sound razor-sharp adamantium claws make when they extract their revenge. They're here. Marvel's X-Men on Sega Genesis.
System to game, sold separately.
Alright, kicking things off at number 29, it's X-Men Mutant Academy on the Game Boy Color. X-Men is a perfect example of why game companies shouldn't even bother bringing out Game Boy Color versions of a proper home system title. Apparently, these games sell well, even though we try to warn you about them. At best, the sorry excuse for a fighting game is the next generation of Tiger handhelds. There were times when I could just smash on the buttons without even looking at the screen and win a fight. Seriously. Number 28, X-Men Reign of Apocalypse on Game Boy Color. The best part about the X-Men comics, cartoons, and movies is how pleasingly unrealistic the fighting is. If we had to watch Wolverine walk up and do the same 5-hit combo on a dozen Sentinels in the new X-Men flick, the thing would tank worse than Waterworld. So I can't get my head around why anyone would enjoy doing this in a video game. By the time I was fighting Magneto with my usual boring combo and the occasional air juggle, I would have killed for a puzzle, a kart racing level, an X-Men bake sale. Anything to break up the tedium. Plus, the in-game dialogue has all the creativity and wit of a Fred Bassett cartoon. Too bad. The game looks excellent. Number 27, X-Men Mutant Wars on the Game Boy Color. Remember those Marvel superhero games that Acclaim made way back when? You know, the ones that sucked? Well, X-Men Mutant Wars is along those lines, unfortunately. Except published by Activision. Granted, it's not as repulsive as Fantastic Four or Iron Man X-O Manowar, but it has some problems. First, while each level features different types of enemies and scenery, the basic concept remains the same. In its defense, each character has a number of moves, and there are plenty of X-Men stars, both heroes and villains. But chances are that this game will still bore you to tears in just a couple of hours. It's too bad. Number 26, X-Men, the official game on Xbox, Xbox 360, PlayStation 2, and GameCube. In case you thought the movie license games were getting better, Activision has dropped its drawers to remind you that game companies can still produce these turds. X-Men is a vile pile of sloppy game design. Crappy cameras, monotonous missions, and clunky controls riddle this experience. It's not particularly fun to play as any of these mutants, especially since the mission variety for each one caps off at 0. Every Wolverine level looks like this, slash a slew of soldiers until you either 1. Get bored and turn off the game, 2. Get bored and return the game, or 3. Get bored and eventually earn the mission complete screen. If you actually get to that third option, you're truly a hero. Number 25, Wolverine, Adamantium Rage on Genesis. First and foremost, what happened to the control? Wolverine is in serious need of a good dose of play control. The apparent lack of it can really test your skill, patience, and the strength of your controller. I found out that mine wasn't so durable. I will say that the graphics are finely done, as are the music tracks. But the poor play control just totally overwhelms the positive aspects of the game. A poor game for a great superhero. Number 24, X-Men Mojo World on Game Gear. I'm really fed up with dull, no-frills side-scrolling games like X-Men 3. This title demands no strategy and even less thought. You just traipse around level after level and beat up badly animated bad guys while listening to annoying music. Sure, the levels are plenty big, but your character moves so slow that he or she takes forever to get anywhere. Each X-Man can use a special attack, which takes some of the monotony out of killing enemies. The sad thing is, we'll probably see more games like this for the Game Gear. Number 23, X-Men vs. Street Fighter on PlayStation. I'm a big fan of the Versus series, but X-Men vs. Street Fighter on the PlayStation just doesn't cut it at all. It's bad enough they had to cut out the 2-on-2 tag play of the arcade, but what's worse is the game suffers from insane amounts of slowdowns. The extra modes are okay, and I actually prefer being able to cancel supers, but the slowdowns just kills it all for me. Too bad the Saturn's dead, Capcom fans. Number 22, X-Men Children of the Atom on PlayStation. Surprise! After months of delays, look what finally showed up at our doorstep. Well, much to my dismay, I wish that I never opened the door. Probe managed to finish the work that Capcom started. But the final product isn't even up to the standards of the PlayStation Darkstalkers, let alone the recently released and very nice Marvel superheroes. Tons of slowdown, no survival or group battle modes, and, well, tons more slowdown. Yeah, save your pennies and wait for X-Men vs. Street Fighter EX. Number 21, X2, Wolverine's Revenge on PlayStation 2. Yeah, it's a good thing that I don't have adamantium claws myself, as there's a good chance that I would have taken out a few controllers while playing Revenge. This game is tough, but usually for the wrong reasons. I can't help feel like I would have had a much easier time getting through it if the shoddy control had received a little more attention. What's with making me awkwardly hold down L2 to stay in stealth mode? Also, while the game looks alright, the environments lack detail. Despite these shortcomings, I still had a genuinely good time playing as one of my favorite comic book heroes, but it's by no means a great game. Number 20, X-Men Mutant Academy 2 on PlayStation. Judged on appearance alone, Mutant Academy 2 looks pretty sweet. The graphics are excellent, showcasing detailed character models, a surplus of impressive special attacks, and animated 3D backgrounds. What hasn't gained any ground is the gameplay. It's obvious that the developers researched many a fighting game when designing Mutant Academy 2. But, despite being a touch more difficult than the first Mutant Academy, the AI is so completely non-existent that the old whack one button and win strategy still works wonders. Great stuff for X-Men fans, but utterly average. Number 19, Marvel Nemesis Rise of the Imperfects on GameCube, PlayStation 2, and Xbox. How does something like this even happen? Electronic Arts splurges on this awesome license, which brings together a gaggle of classic comic heroes and even a full slate of original characters. But the so-called story mode is a narrative light, repetitive bash fest. Thanks to the detail-free graphics and a severe lack of gameplay ideas, this game runs out of steam after an hour or two. The fights may be intense, but they're also cheap as hell. And no, Nemesis doesn't work well as a one-on-one fighter either. It's so simplistic that you can squeeze every drop of fun out of it in one evening. What a waste and a disappointment for comic fans. Number 18, Spider-Man and X-Men Arcade's Revenge on Game Gear. Allowing you to play as several superheroes is a big plus for this one. The levels are huge, but the game is a little on the difficult side. This one will take several plays before mastering all the characters' moves. Number 17, Wolverine Adamantium Rage on Super Nintendo. Everyone's favorite X-Men fares pretty well on the Super NES. Wolverine has plenty of moves and lots of technique, and fans of the comic character will definitely want to check this one out. But in the end, it's routine action. Number 16, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the Xbox. I generally prefer Street Fighters of the less insane variety, but Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is still an enjoyable, silly fighter. It offers a ton of vastly different playable characters, some easily exploitable. A few are relatively harmless, while others are simply laughable on a conceptual level. Embarrassing characters aside, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 is still a 2D visual tour de force, bursting with vivacious colors, stylish humor, and fluid animations. Ultimately, though, the mysterious lack of Xbox support makes this antiquated fire feel irrelevant on the Xbox. Been there, done that. Number 15, Gamesmaster's Legacy on Game Gear. There's some unique options this time around, including the ability to pick from more X-Men as the game progresses. The graphics are very good and the moves are easy enough to execute. A good sequel. And we're back with number 14, Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes on PlayStation. Look, you know what we're gonna say. It's the same thing we've said for the previous two PlayStation Versus games. Not being able to tag your partner in non-crossover mode play is disappointing, period. It's even more annoying here because you can't have a partner and a third special hero in the normal game. On the plus side, the animation is impressive for a PlayStation sprite-based fighter. Super cancels, as always, are a cool feature, though we would have preferred if there was an option that you could turn them on or off. If you can't get the Dreamcast version, then this isn't a bad alternative. Number 13, X-Men Next Dimension on the GameCube. You'd expect Next Dimension to be a step up from the PlayStation Academy games, but it's actually more of a mutated shuffle sideways. It's not crap. X fans will enjoy the easy moves and massive environments, plus familiar heroes, villains, and locations. Even Professor X himself, Patrick Stewart, lends his voice. If you look below the surface, though, you'll find a merely passable fighting game. Too many characters play almost identically, and orchestrating movement with both the D-pad and the analog stick creates crazy exploitable mistakes, such as blocking when moving in for a throw. This one's for the fans only. Number 12, Spider-Man, X-Men, Arcade's Revenge on the Super Nintendo. First of all, the fact that you can't select the character you want hurts this cart greatly. Each character is designated to a group of levels, and you have to complete them using only that specific character. Bummer! The graphics and tunes are okay, but the sounds get annoying, especially Spider Sense. Nice try, but no banana. Number 11, X-Men on the Genesis. The X-Men is a cool license, but this game manages only to capture the powers and skills of the best of the bunch, with little innovation along the way. The interaction is a bit jerky. For a comic-based title, there really should have been more emphasis on fluidity. The gameplay is straightforward stuff, replayed with different characters. Number 10, X-Men 2 Clone Wars on the Genesis. X-Men 2 Clone Wars is pretty much the first Genesis X-Men game, except there are more characters to choose from, each with diversified attacks. Yet, the game suffers from generic sound effects and other subpar elements, not to mention that goofy, mandatory introduction stage. Granted, there are several attacks and techniques to master, but the game never really comes alive despite a few cool, not to mention huge, bosses and challenging levels. Number 9. X-Men Mutant Academy on PlayStation. After seeing the X-Men so many times in the Capcom vs. fighting games looking just like their comic book selves in 2D with silky smooth animation, they look pretty horrible here with semi-clunky polygons. There's enough characters, moves, and special attacks to keep it fun against friends for a bit, but after extended play or against the CPU, it gets dull. Nothing special, but if you're a fan who needs more after seeing the movies 10 times, this'll work. Number 8. Marvel Superheroes on the PlayStation. Here's a game that I've been very critical of thanks to the tacky X-Men fighting engine. While many argue in its favor, I don't enjoy it nearly as much as the Street Fighter engine. So when I see that parody of Street Fighter plagued with slowdowns and fewer animations than in the arcade, I just cannot support it wholeheartedly. Marvel Superheroes is a good fighter, don't get me wrong. It's just that if comic characters weren't there, I'd be less apt to play it. Number 7. Marvel Ultimate Alliance on the Xbox 360. Can you name more than 24 Marvel superheroes off the top of your head? Yeah, it's a lot. More than enough for Activision to include all the big ones in Ultimate Alliance while still leaving space for some obscure favorites. Sweet Christmas, they've even crammed Luke Cage in here. It's a big game, but it's still a beat 'em up at heart. Yeah, you've got a ton of guys to play with, but they're still beating up wave after wave of identical Doom bots. Nothing but truth, justice, and the American way to keep you from simply finding a single attack or combo that works and just mashing it forever. Number 6. X-Men Legends on the PlayStation 2, GameCube, and Xbox. After a poor solo adventure starring Wolverine, Legends helps bring Marvel's gifted students back to respectability. Comic book loyalists will dig the diverse cast, the beefy character customization options, and the ability to hunt down Magneto while sharing the couch with 3 fellow X-heads. But there are a few abnormalities in the game's mutant DNA, including dim-witted AI squad mates, enemies who pack a bit too hard of a punch early on, and a weak story. Still, it's worth checking out. Number 5. Marvel Superheroes vs. Street Fighter on the PlayStation. While I wasn't crazy about the versus fighting thing, it's starting to grow on me. Capcom is starting to nail 2D fighters on the PlayStation, and the action is almost perfect. Big characters like Hulk and Blackheart don't play as well as the smaller guys, but it's acceptable. The crossover mode finally allows true versus action like the arcade. The ending collection and hidden artwork are a nice incentive for beating the game repeatedly. Number 4. Marvel Superheroes on the Saturn. I guess we're seeing the Saturn's 2D limit, because Marvel Superheroes suffers from a bit of slowdown. It's not unplayable, just don't expect a perfect arcade translation. The game itself is actually quite fun. Don't let its flashy, cartoony exterior fool you. Marvel Superheroes has a lot of moves, combos, and juggles. You might not be able to tell just from looking at it, but Marvel Superheroes actually requires a bit of technique. Number 3. X-Men Mutant Apocalypse on the Super Nintendo. For once, a game that does justice to one of my favorite comics. First things first, the gameplay is absolutely outstanding. Sure, there are Street Fighter moves, but who cares? This isn't another Final Fight. This game requires skill and timing. The graphics are good, but not great, and the music is sort of blah. However, X-Men is fun to play, and that's what really counts. X-Men is a decent side-scroller. Number 2, Marvel vs. Capcom Clash of Superheroes on the Dreamcast. If there's just one thing that this really highlights, it's the fact that the Dreamcast joypad isn't really suited for 2D fighters. It may be okay for Soul Calibur, but I had a really hard time playing this and had to switch to an arcade stick. That's quite an investment if this is the only fighter that you want. As Capcom fighters go, though, this is pretty damn perfect, and it captures the arcade game wonderfully. Hours will disappear as you master it. And finally, at number 1, it's Marvel vs. Capcom 2 on the Dreamcast. This game is something special. Despite the deluge of Street Fighter-related software that Capcom has released up until now, Marvel vs. Capcom 2 stands out as state-of-the-art in fighting games, combining a simpler control scheme, gorgeous high-res 2D, 3D backgrounds, and super fast gameplay. Marvel vs. Capcom 2 takes Capcom's Versus series to the next level. If you dig on 2D fighters, this is the cream of the crop. A must-buy for 2D fighting fans.
Magneto has arrived, only in X-Men 2 for Sega Genesis. Now 2 can play the most mutant heroes and Magneto. Sega! Marvel's X-Men 2 for Sega Genesis. Hardware and game cartridge each sold separately.
Hey, thanks for watching us count down these classic reviews. If you liked what you saw here, then you should know that we have dozens of these episodes, including franchises like Batman, Dragon Quest, Golden Axe, Sonic, Mario, Burnout, Gran Turismo, Final Fantasy, Street Fighter, Metal Gear, and just so many more. I'm serious, we have literally dozens of these episodes, so check out that playlist when you have a chance. Now, here's the question I have for you. What's your favorite X-Men game? Look, before I even finished asking that question, I knew what you were going to say. I have a hunch that a lot of people are going to mention the 1992 X-Men arcade game. Or who knows, maybe you'll surprise me. I can't wait to see your picks in the comments below. In other news, we'll be back later this week with reviews of Death of a Wish and Son of the Dragon King, along with an announcement about the future of Review Crew and a whole bunch of new shows that are going to be debuting in April. Boy, we have a lot to cover this week, so I strongly recommend you click that subscribe button and support what we're doing here. Until then,